Welcome back to our Franchise Fundamentals series where we go through what franchising is, what it looks like, and ultimately help you decide if it's going to be right for your next business endeavor. Now, this is the 7th video in this series, and today we're going to be discussing what the day-to-day life looks like for a franchisee, or more specifically, what does ownership look like? Now, we don't have the time or ability really to go through every single franchise model that exists. There's over 4,000 models out there. So what we're going to do is silo into 2 main categories that's pretty much going to encompass any franchise business you see. The first being brick and mortar businesses. So these are businesses that have a storefront that customers will walk into in order to transact. And the second being service-based businesses. So these are more technician and truck style businesses, whether it be home service or commercial services. Customers aren't going to typically walk into the building. So those are the main 2 categories of businesses that we're going to be discussing what the day-to-day looks like for each. And we're going to focus on 3 ownership levels, which I think will paint a really good picture as to what this actually looks like. We're going to start with owner-operator, then move into an executive owner model, and then lastly into absentee ownership. So by the end of this video, you'll have an idea of what different levels of ownership look like on a day-to-day basis for those 2 main categories of franchise businesses. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about these 2 archetypes of franchise models and just go over some brief differences between the 2. So the first being brick and mortar businesses that have a storefront, okay? Types of businesses within this space are any sort of food, any sort of tutoring centers, entertainment, anything where you have a customer actually entering into your store to facilitate the business. So in general, these types of businesses are a little bit more expensive to get started because you do need a more prime real estate location in order to facilitate the business, and you have a much higher initial startup cost because, again, you have to build this place out. You have to spec it out. You have to get the contractors in, design it. If you have any special equipment specifically for food, you have to get all that purchased, installed. So typically a little bit of a higher initial investment, but the positive of these types of businesses is that you don't have to invest as heavily, not that you don't at all, but you don't have to invest as heavily in marketing because your storefront is marketing. If you have a beauty concept, say in the waxing space, and someone is driving around, they go to the grocery store, they're going to be driving by your location if you're in the right area, and ultimately you're generating a lead just by existing doing your normal day-to-day business. Now, service-based businesses, on the other hand, are a little bit different. Typically speaking, they're a little bit more affordable to start up because you don't need to have a prime real estate location. You don't need a build out, and you can finance whatever trucks or equipment you're looking to get started with. Now, also with service-based businesses, you typically start lower than what your territory can handle. So if you're in a, to say, mobile pet grooming, okay, maybe your territory can hold or facilitate 10 trucks worth of business, but you're not going to start with 10. You're going to start with 1 or 2 and then grow. And then as soon as you're maxed out on those, you order the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th, and you can scale up. So cash flow can allow you to scale a little bit more easily compared with a brick and mortar business where when you start your location, you have to basically find a location that's going to be the size you need at scale. You're not going to be moving halfway through your business operation more than likely. Now, the con or the drawback to the service-based business is that you are hunting every single day to get your phone to ring. So whether it's you out in the field marketing or networking or spending more on your marketing dollars to get the phones to ring, that's where the rub in most service-based businesses is how do I get the phone to ring? How do I get leads coming in? Because they don't just see me organically and reach out. Typically, it's through some sort of paid medium or guerrilla-based marketing where you're actually out in the field to help generate business. So now that we have our overarching industries defined, now let's talk about ownership. So starting off with an owner-operator model. Now, this is going to be true for both brick and mortar and service-based businesses. If you are doing an owner-operator model, it's always going to be more affordable because you are going to take on the role or roles of multiple people within the business. So definitely more time, but it allows you to be more efficient with your dollars spent. So for a brick and mortar style business, some of the day-to-day for an owner operator is going to be opening and closing the store, actively engaging with customers as they come in, obviously providing support. Say if you have a food-based business, if one of your cooks in the back is having an issue, you're going to be stepping in and actually helping them figure out whatever issue they're facing, and pretty much managing the store. With brick and mortar, you're going to have technicians more than likely doing all the actual technical work. If you buy a waxing franchise, you're probably not going to be doing the waxing yourself. You're going to have technicians do that, but you're going to be doing all of the more administrative roles and customer interaction aside from the actual service that they're coming in to have done. Now, on a service-based business side, as an owner-operator, you are definitely going to be managing the operation. So more than likely, if you have a service-based business, the operation is really where the work is, because the franchisor is going to have built out marketing plans, campaigns. So you don't really have to think about how I'm going to generate the business. You're just going to have to execute on that. So on a day-to-day basis, you're really going to be managing your operation, right? You're going to have technicians going out to people's homes, so you need to make sure that they're equipped. You have to make sure that they understand what they're going to be doing for the day, and ultimately managing them over the course of their day to make sure things are going according to plan. Now, in addition to this, you're going to have to put after hours in to do that local networking. So a lot of this is done through, say, the Chamber of Commerce, or if there's a specific organization that's meeting and you're going to go and give a little presentation. But that's a great way to use your time as an owner-operator to really facilitate the business in your local market. So moving on to our second level of ownership, being an executive model. So with an executive model, in both cases, you're typically going to have some level of management that's handling the day-to-day. So you're not vital to the day-to-day operation. You have a manager in place that's going to be more so handling that aspect, but you are still involved in the business. You can't just leave for a week and expect your business to grow. So with the executive model, you're not there in the day-to-day, you're not there every single day, or at least not in the mornings, but you are going to be active in the actual business itself to some capacity. So for a brick and mortar style business, what this will look like is, you have someone open the store, but you're going to come in later. You're probably going to take inventory. You're going to have an assessment on your actual technicians, see how they're doing, following up, managing in that sense, but you're typically going to leave a little bit before closing and let your employees clean up, close out, and ultimately close the business for the day. So on the service-based side, again, you're probably not going to be dispatching crews in the executive model. You'll have some level of operational management in place where you have an operation manager or a lead technician come in, make sure to get the morning rolling, get the crews out, and you'll follow in afterwards to do more administrative tasks. Now, you probably will be managing the crews. Typically, the operations manager can do this, but if they're going to be out on a truck as well and their primary duty in that manager or operation manager role is to just get the crews running, you're going to then be doing the full oversight of everyone who's out and about. Now, you'll also, again, still be paying attention to marketing and sales because you're still in charge of really getting that phone to ring. So all the same responsibilities after hours are still in play with an executive owner model in the service space. But again, it just takes the pressure off of you of having to be there specifically in the morning to get the crews out and their days rolling. Now, moving on to our third tier of ownership, which is absentee. Now, before we get into this information, the term absentee is somewhat controversial. And what I mean by that is absentee does not mean passive. If you want something that's completely passive, you don't even have to think about in any capacity, go buy stocks. This is not what ownership looks like for an absentee owner in the franchise space, or really any business for that matter. Now, absentee does mean that you have a sufficient enough management team, keyword, in place where you are at least 2, preferably 3 levels removed from any sort of day-to-day operation. So you are not vitally important for the day-to-day of the business to actually happen. but you are going to still be in charge and you have to have oversight. The business is probably not going to be run completely hands off because the owner is going to be the primary one who's responsible for the business to grow or die. So you do have some involvement, but it's definitely not in the day to day, and it's more so on a week to week basis or month to month, depending on how absentee your business is. Now, how this looks in a brick and mortar style business, and I should preface this by saying you probably have multiple locations at this point, because in order to have a general manager get paid accordingly, you need the cash flow of multiple units in order for this to happen. So you'll have a general manager who's going to be managing your stores on a totality basis, and your role is to check in with them again on a weekly or a monthly basis to make sure everything is functioning accordingly. A lot of the meetings that you're going to be having at the absentee level are all KPI based. So key performance indicator, if you're not familiar with what that means, but you're going to be running your business by numbers. So when you're having these conversations with your GM, yeah, you're probably going to have some level of personal conversation in the sense of like, oh, how's, Jimmy the sandwich maker doing? But more than likely, you don't even know who the sandwich makers are in your business. That's how far removed you are. You're really talking about numbers. How are we doing on profitability? What was our expense report looking like? In order to grow for next quarter, what do we need to get done? You can help brainstorm with that GM to optimize your system. And then when we take this over to the service industry, as an absentee owner, again, you're going to have multiple levels of management, and depending on the industry, you might need a few more than others, but we don't get into those details. But essentially, you're doing the same type of management that you are in the brick and mortar style business. You're talking with your GM, again, probably having multiple territories, and you're going through the business by the numbers. What was our marketing spend? What was our, if you have, just say you're in a trash hauling business, what was our expense on dumping at the local landfill? Going over those metrics, because that's really where you're going to see problems arise. If you know that your marketing spend in the summer is typically around 10%, and this year it's at 16%, okay, well, what are we doing differently? Are our salespeople not closing correctly? Are we not getting to the leads quick enough, so we have to buy more? And ultimately, you'll be able to see some issues with your business just purely on a numerical basis. So that should give you a pretty good overview of what the day-to-day looks like for different types of businesses, being brick and mortar and service-based. And with each associated ownership level, what are your daily duties looking like? What's your time requirement looking like? Now let's transition a little bit into what's possible for you, right? That's why you're watching this video. You're trying to think, what ownership's appropriate for me? This is going to be completely dependent on your risk tolerance, your capital that you're bringing to the table, and your experience with previous businesses or industries. But on a general level, I would say if you are very new to business ownership, if you've only ever been a corporate employee, you've never really been the last line of defense, if you will, with no one to really go to in order to figure out any problems, I would highly suggest starting with an owner-operator model, because it allows for you to be in the business. You learn it from the bottom up. You don't have to stay there forever, probably 3 to 6 months minimum, most a year or two, but you really get a good idea of how the business works, and then how business in general works, because I promise you're going to be experiencing things that you never, ever thought you would when you were working a corporate job. So I would advise, if you're very new to business in general, start with an owner-operator model. It's going to be the easiest transition and allow for you to ultimately step up to the plate and handle any issues, again, with the support from corporate. Now, if you are a little bit more established with your business acumen, maybe you've owned businesses before, or you worked for a smaller startup where, in that hectic environment, that owner is wearing a million hats, so you might have taken on responsibility that a typical employee wouldn't necessarily do. If you feel a little bit more comfortable with being a true business owner, you can start at that executive level. Now, I'll also say it helps to have additional capital, because if you are going to start at the executive level, that means you're going to have to put some management in place right from the start. The positive is that frees up your time to not have to be there every single day, involved in the day-to-day. The drawback is you have to pay for that. So if you are very well capitalized for a specific business opportunity and you have some business acumen, you feel comfortable taking on a little bit more risk, you can definitely start at that executive owner level, knowing you're going to have to put a key employee in place who's going to treat the business as if it was their own, and you have to be able to manage them accordingly. Now, moving on to our final ownership, absentee. This is the dream for any business owner. Anybody who gets into business, or I should say most people who get into business, want to build their business up to where it doesn't require them really at all, specifically in the day-to-day. They want to be able to wake up in the morning, know their business is operating, look forward to their Friday check-in with their GM, and then watch the bank account just pile up. But with that being said, the beauty of franchising is that the system that you're going to be buying into should already have experience getting people from owner-operator to executive and then ultimately to that absentee owner model. So if that's something that you are interested in, whatever ownership level, be open with your franchisor that you're speaking with, because it helps to have an idea of A, how much experience they have getting people to certain levels, and B, what it takes to get there. The whole point of franchising is you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And that is leveraged in the beginning before you even make a decision by matching what your goals and vision are for the business and having a candid conversation with the franchisor. They'll be able to help guide you into getting a realistic vision of what that's going to look like based on your goals. If you want to build a huge business and be a local dominator in any given market or industry, let them know that. They'll give you an idea of what it's going to take. They're going to direct you to have specific validation calls with franchisees who have done that before, so you can really see behind the door of what it takes to get to that level, and that should help weigh into whether that brand is right for you. Because if you talk to a lot of people who are an absentee owner and you realize, man, I don't know if I'm willing to put in the work in the beginning to get it to that point. Or, wow, like they're really managing this huge operation. They have 16 managers, and they say the biggest headache is getting calls in the middle of the night by their managers because there's a million issues to handle. Whatever the case may be, you want to have a clear picture before you engage in the business. So make sure to have that candid conversation with whatever franchisor you're talking about of what your ultimate goals are, and get the resources to see what that looks like on a real basis, speaking with people who are actually doing what you're looking to do. So there you have it. There's a condensed version of what the day-to-day of a franchisee looks like in the two main verticals of industry, being brick and mortar and service-based businesses, and then put in combination with the three levels of ownership: owner, operator, executive, and absentee. So if you are liking this content in this video series, make sure to go to our next video, video 8, and that's where we're going to be going through the systems and support that franchisor give their franchisees. So we'll see you in the next one.